I really noticed how the world was looking at me and talking to me. Like even at, if you're just at the grocery or you're interfacing with people, especially younger people. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing. It's just the way it is. You are viewed differently. I have felt discriminated against and I haven't taken it personally. Well, maybe I have, but you realize, yeah, the world is looking at me differently now. The world doesn't take me as seriously, or they kind of do write you off.
Welcome to Women Mastering Midlife, where we dive deep into the rich complexities of womanhood in our middle years. I'm your host, Victoria Bird, pharmacist, certified women's health coach, and your guide on this transformative journey. Whether you're navigating perimenopause, thriving in menopause, or mastering midlife's many transitions, this is your weekly dose of expert guidance, compassionate support, and a judgment-free space to explore it all. So get cozy, hit that play button, and let's rewrite the narrative around this remarkable stage from being something to dread into a beautiful transition. So I am so excited to have on the podcast today, Miss Christine Gorton. Chris and I know each other from doing a business mastermind course under our business coach, the amazing Krista Dempscher. I'm going to go ahead and plug her too. We did a several-week course where we got to dig deep into our personal stories, learn a lot about each other. And when I was creating this podcast, she was one of the first people I thought of who has an amazing story. And she's still breaking down barriers and doing things that, quote unquote, at her age are just, not very expected. So I'm so glad to have her today. So I'm gonna introduce Chris right now with a few things. She sent me a bio that was just so amazing, and I was in awe of what she has accomplished in her life already. So I'm going to share that with you right now. Chris is from Michigan, often known as the Mitten State, and has enjoyed life on the same street since she was 4 years old. A first-generation college student, she enrolled at the age of 23 and graduated from Michigan State University in 1988. She credits the Miss America organization in part for her education, as scholarships she won through the pageant prompted a degree in communications. Following her participation as a contestant, Chris continued her Miss America leadership role as a mentor to countless women spanning 4 decades. Her professional resume ranges from her first job counting night crawlers at a bait shop to planning events for celebrities such as the legendary Oscar de la Renta, global fashion designer Carolina Herrera, home and fashion creator Nicole Miller, and Basketball Hall of Fame and Big Ten national champion coach Tom Izzo. She has also produced and hosted a weekly television program and morning drive time radio show. Currently, Chris spends her time as a vacation rental host with VRBO and Airbnb. Her commitment to excellence has earned her a premier host status with consistent 5-star ratings since beginning in 2020. Her most recent adventure took her back to the stage, where just a few weeks ago, she competed in the Mrs. Michigan pageant at the age of 62. While she didn't come away with the crown, she did earn several awards, including Year's Most Married and Mrs. Congeniality. Chris, I am so excited to have you today.
Oh my gosh. I'm delighted to be here. And hearing you read that resume, it's like, wow, I guess I have, when you live your life, you just think, oh, I'm just living my life. But then when you hear, what you hear it kind of play back to you, you're like, wow, I guess I have done a few things here and there. So I'm just really delighted to be here and honored that you would even consider me for such an important opportunity. So thank you to you for inviting me.
Oh my gosh. I mean, I'm sorry. And you're not even done yet. Like you're still you are more active than I am on a daily basis. I mean, the things that you're doing, you've got a YouTube channel, you're on Instagram, you're running your Airbnb, you're always on the go. If you're not having an adventure with, your husband, you're like off doing amazing things. I just don't know how you do it all.
Well, I guess I take breaks now and again, and I am a big believer. Martha Stewart takes a nap in the afternoon, so I don't beat myself up if I decide I need a quick little cat nap in the afternoon. But yeah, I have done a lot of things. And when I was actually getting ready for the Mrs. Michigan pageant, one of the things that we had to do, you had this opportunity to submit for other awards, and one was like a community service award, one was like a career achievement award. And so I decided, of course, to do all of them and submit an application for all of them. And when I was doing my career resume, I'm like, wow, I have done a lot of things. And I'm kind of like one of those persons when you look at it, it doesn't seem like I stick with anything for a long period of time. And I'm not sure if that's good or bad because, years and years ago, if you didn't do something for like 30 years, you were considered, a risk because you would jump from thing to thing. And it seems like that's just kind of what I've always done. And I'm not sure why. Maybe it's just because I want to try something new, or if my heart's not in it anymore, I want to move on to something else. Or maybe I got fired from a job, which was one of the things too. I mean, that would definitely put an end to things. I guess I'm just not sure. Maybe it's just because life happens. And when it does, you decide, well, what am I going to do? Am I going to stick with this, or am I going to try something else? And I guess that's the path that I've always taken. And I have to say, with a wonderful husband, I've always kind of had a safety net to do those things. Not everybody can have that opportunity, but I've always had the privilege of having a little bit of a safety net. But here's the thing, Victoria, I've always worked since I was 16 when I started that job at the bait shop. So I've always had a job, and I've never, even when I knew I didn't have to work, I always felt compelled to work because I always wanted to pull my weight. I kind of from that generation where I've attached my worth to a job or what I'm doing, what I'm contributing to. So I never felt like I could just not do anything. I had to do something. And besides, you get kind of bored after a while. You can only work in the yard or clean your house or just, volunteer for stuff. And that's kind of one of the things that happened too when I was, and maybe I'm just babbling here, but when I got fired from my job, all of a sudden that happened and I had no idea that was going to happen. So I found myself trying to validate myself by volunteering for everything I could. And then, I was like just doing all the things just to make sure I was validating myself. So that kind of happened. But I guess I've just kind of always tried something new. Tried to step outside.
And the conversation about validating yourself by having, a job to prove your worth, or, to bring something, to the family pool of income, so to speak. I think that's interesting. When I decided to step out of pharmacy and stay home with the kids, I had a moment where I asked my husband for an annual review because I needed that validation, that proof that even though I wasn't providing an income, I was providing some sort of service and contribution. And I don't know where that stems from. That's a really interesting conversation of, where is that need to contribute come from for women? Like how is that brought about to us? And I don't know if it's society.
I mean, you really can't blame it on social media because, 40 years ago, 30 years ago, there wasn't such a thing, but there was such a thing as a social world and peer pressure and, people determining what your life should look like for you. So that's probably part of it. And, I came from a family where my mom worked since she was 18 years old. And, she didn't have a college education. And, so I had two working parents all the time and always contributing to the household. So maybe that's where it comes from too, is that work ethic. My mom worked for the phone company and, she was an operator and that was such a dream job to have at that time. And so you had a work ethic. You went to work no matter what, if it didn't matter. You went to work and it was a badge of honor to have like a perfect attendance record. So maybe that's part of it. I don't know, but a lot of it too, Victoria, I think you're right, is validating your worth by what you're contributing and what you're doing. And you're right. We attach that sometimes to money and we often need to remind ourselves that our worth is more than money. When I lost that job, I was like, what am I going to do now? I put so much importance on a title that when the title was gone, it was like, I felt like I was humiliated. I wanted to hide from the world. And so, I don't know, maybe that's part of it. I guess I don't know, but it's something to consider. Why does that happen?
I don't know. Maybe it is familial. Maybe it is just the way that society has placed that kind of, the American dream, working hard, the work ethic, all those things. But I will tell you, I'm very thankful that social media was not around.
Me too.
20, 30 years ago.
Me too. Me too. I was having a conversation not too long ago with a friend when I was preparing for Mrs. Michigan. She's a very smart woman. That's why I wanted to connect with her. I met her through the Mrs. America organization years and years ago. And she has a very big girl job now in the health industry. And so I wanted to meet with her and talk to her a little bit. And our conversation actually went to, we talked about menopause a bit, but we also talked about like, oh yes, okay, so you're not feeling well, but guess what? It doesn't matter. There's still laundry to do and you still have to go to work. And by the way, the kids have to be picked up and, oh, that's right. You're going out of town. So make sure all the laundry is done. And you can't feel bad. You can't be in bed today or have a mood swing because guess what? You have things you have to do. You have to do all the things and still be lovely and polite and, satisfy everybody but you. And I know there's a lot of pressure on men. I know that, but still I feel like we carry so much.
Yeah. The mental load of women, I think is very intense. And so when you said you talked about menopause. And so I wanted to ask you, being 62, you went through it before. It feels like right now there's an explosion of conversations around menopause. There's Women on the Hill. We're fighting for money for women's health research. But when you were going through it, was it something that was talked about or how did it go for you? What was your experience?
Oh, no. And I was thinking about this in advance of our conversation because I know that's a huge topic of concern for you. And it's something that you really focus on. Quite frankly, I'm not sure when I went through menopause. I'm not really sure. I think I know. So I'm 62 now. And I think maybe I don't really remember any because nobody talked about it. It was kind of laughed about, like Menopause, the musical. I mean, it was kind of made fun of 20 some years ago. It was kind of like an amusement topic. Oh, that thing. Oh yeah, that's so funny. You're having hot flashes and all the stuff. And it was kind of made fun of, but so it wasn't really talked about. So I'm not really sure when I started it. And because I was on a birth control method that really controlled my hormones, I think that really made a huge difference in recognizing whether or not what changes my body was going through. I do remember having some night sweats. I do remember, can I say this? I actually peed the bed one night. I mean, It just happened. I mean, I didn't know what was I really didn't know what was happening. And I didn't really talk to anybody about it. I just didn't. I just figured, oh, this is what happens. And then I just sort of waited until it all stopped. So I didn't take medication. Maybe it's because my symptoms weren't as severe. I'm sure I would have sought out something if I really felt like I needed to, but I don't know that I really went through a lot of extremes with it. Yeah. But it wasn't talked about.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's interesting that it wasn't a topic of conversation for women's health to reach out and find support and get what they need to be able to thrive while they're dealing with it. But it was the butt of a joke, or it was a storyline on a TV show and the woman was crazy or, angry or, having fits or hot flashes where they were just exacerbated on television. And it's interesting, the shift now. And I don't know if it's probably because there's so many more women that are celebrities that are going through it. And with social media, they're putting their lives out there and sharing with everyone. So I think, I'm fortunate. I'm on the early side of it. I'm going to be 44 in July. And for the last 2 years, I've been miserable. I've had everything. Maybe you're one of those lucky 15% that don't really have the experience of horrific. I mean, it's terrible. If I don't use my estradiol patch and my progesterone, I'm soaking wet. I'm having hot flashes during the day. My hair was falling out. My skin was always dry. I have like horrific periods. So I think, there are women who can get through it, not unscathed, but they don't have the extreme experience.
Right.
But, it's just interesting how now we can have the conversations. There is options out there.
Yeah. We can say words like, we can say the forbidden words, and I can't even think of the words, but I'm sure there were forbidden words that you didn't want to talk about, whether you were a lady or, whether those are things that ladies don't talk about, or we don't want to hear about it because you've got, like if we were saying earlier, you've got things to do. So get over it, forget it and just move on. But now like there is more conversation about it. And I mean, it's even on television, words that never would have been said on television in commercials and even in storylines it's being talked about. So, people like you that are bringing more attention to it is wonderful. And it gives women a forum to kind of talk about it and understand that they're not alone, that there are other people out there experiencing the same thing, which is so good. So kudos to you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
But let's talk about Miss America and how, like, your experience with that, because that's so amazing to me that I'm speaking with somebody who was part of Miss America.
Yeah. Well, a mutual friend of ours, Julia Chang, was Mrs. Maryland.
Okay.
And so that kind of, and I knew about the program actually, Victoria, because one of my careers that I had, I was the director of public relations and special events for a retailer here in the Midwest. And so as that, I was asked to judge Mrs. Michigan at one point. And I did. So I did, of course. So I knew about it, but I kind of wrote it off. And here's why. Because I was involved so many years with Miss America, and this is another example of how things change and probably change for the good if it's guarded and for the good. But when you're involved with Miss America, because it's like this national icon, like 122 years old, and you are embedded in it so much in the community, everybody else is kind of like, Miss America is the standard. And so every other pageant is kind of like, and I don't mean that to sound arrogant or, fussy. I think it's just kind of the community, it's Miss America and you're part of this program and you believe in it and you're, so you just kind of plus you're busy. It's a huge commitment. So I kind of wrote off that whole Mrs. Michigan thing until I like to say I waved farewell to the Mrs. America organization in March of last year in 2023.
Okay.
Because it was time. It was time for me to step away after 40 years. I loved every minute of it, but it was time to say goodbye. New leadership was happening at Miss America. It just felt right. 40 years, a nice round number. It's time. And I was getting a little burned out. So I said goodbye to all of that. But when I did, I realized how much white space I had in my life because it was such a huge commitment, not only in my life, white space, but in my head, because it's mental too. I mean, you're constantly thinking about the next thing. You're getting somebody ready to go to Miss Michigan. And then once that happens, now you're having a pageant in 3 months. So it's a constant circle of stuff. So when I waved goodbye to all of that, I realized, wow, what am I going to do now? I mean, even though I have lots of things in my life, but it was such a huge commitment. So I'm like, well, I wanted to expand my community of women. And I also wanted to look for new volunteer opportunities. So I thought, well, let's go back to the pageant community. And that's when I looked into registering and applying to be in the Mrs. Michigan pageant at age 62. Once I got going, I had moments where I'm like, what the heck are you doing? I remember I was at Sam's Club one day in the bathroom. I went in to use the restroom and the lighting at Sam's Club in the restroom is not great. And I remember I was washing my hands and I looked up at myself in the mirror and I saw all of these wrinkles and I saw, and I had my glasses on too. So, then I could really see. And I thought, girl, what are you doing? Who do you think you are and that you can actually do this? So I went to the car and I had a moment and I actually did an Instagram story on it really quickly because I'm like, who do you think you are? And then of course, a couple of days later, I'm like, no, I can do this. I want to do this. I want to challenge myself. I had some little checks that I wanted to achieve. I wanted to take a look at my body health. I wanted to exercise again. There were lots of things that I wanted to do that I knew being in a pageant would force me to do, would force me to set a goal to do because I would always want to do my best. And so I did it. And I'm so grateful that I did. It was everything that I'd hoped it would be. Like I said, I didn't win the crown. And I don't know if I'm trying to validate the fact that I didn't win the crown by saying it wasn't my time. And, now that I see who did win, she's doing such a great job and maybe the timing wasn't right. I don't know. But I feel very good about doing it and being in it. And if anybody would ever, consider it, it's just such a great opportunity to meet amazing people and put yourself out there and try something new and challenge yourself. And, if it's not a pageant, maybe it's something else. I don't know. But I feel like you got to continue to go. And just because I get a Social Security check does not mean my life is over.
Yeah.
I have so much to do.
Well, you definitely have the energy for it, Chris. Every time we would get together in our mastermind group on our webcams, it's like, man, she has so much energy and so much gusto that I hope I have a smidgen of your energy at 62, because I feel like I need a nap already at this age.
No, you will. And so looking at Mrs. Michigan now, of course, I don't know if I think it's like anything, when you do it and you don't get that maybe end goal that you were hoping for, you're like, well, am I going to do this again? Should I try it again? And I'm kind of going back and forth. I don't know that I'm going to do it again. Right now, I don't think I will, because I did what I set out to do. I achieved what I set out to do. I don't know what would be my reason to go back, other than I would want to try again and do better. Just be a even better version of myself. I don't know. But this is kind of a funny story about, so when it's all over, you start to think about, okay, what happened? What didn't I do right? Why didn't I win? All the stuff. And I had worked really hard on diet and exercise. And I thought for sure I was going to win overall swimsuit. I just knew I was. Because I felt so good in my body, and I felt like because I've been involved with Miss America, I felt like I knew how to walk on stage. I felt like I had all the stuff. I did not. In fact, I found out I did not get 1 point in swimsuit. Not one. And I'm like, what the heck? Well, I saw the pictures. So we had a professional photographer that did pictures, and I saw the pictures, and I can see why. I still feel great about where I am with my body right now. I feel good about how I am. But I can see at age 62, I have lost muscle in my legs, and I'm not, it's not that I feel like I'm flabby, but I don't have that same muscle tone that I had when I was, even in my 40s. And so I can see. And when you look at me on stage, I was too thin by the standards of looking at muscle tone. And, I felt like I looked great. I was thin, but I didn't have that tone. And that comes with age. I guess it just comes with age.
Yeah, there is muscle loss. You lose a percentage of muscle every year after a certain age, and it takes a lot more work to get it back.
Yeah.
Once, the older you get, especially once you're fully in menopause, that muscle, it tends to dissipate and then leave us much faster than we would like it to, I'm sure.
Well, so now I have a goal of working on it. I'm going to work on it. I want to stay where I am in terms of where I am with my body and my weight and in my eating habits. I want to stay with all of that. But I now have right over here in my office, my little gym set up, and I'm going to continue to work on my legs so that I guess if I ever do decide to go back in a year, I'm ready. But I feel like, well, maybe just for overall health. And as I age, I need that muscle tone around my bones to keep me strong, because as you age, and I know we wanted to talk about, how people look at you, and maybe this is kind of a lead into that. You want to make sure that you stay healthy and strong so that you can do the things that you want to do to be active: gardening, walking, going on trips, vacationing, being able to climb things, if you go to some place where there's steps. I don't know, you need to maintain that health. So I'm going to work on it.
Yeah. It's that, and that's one of the things when I talk to women about not just their lifespan, but their health span, because you don't want to be feeble and ill toward the end of your lifespan. You want to be healthy, your whole lifespan. So that's really important to keep working on that muscle growth, so that you do have the ability to carry your own groceries in and walk stairs and live independently.
Or if you fall, you've got good muscle around what your bone structure, and you heal. I mean, I'm not a doctor, but I think you heal faster because you've got good muscle, or your bones are protected a little bit more because you do have good muscle around your bones. So it is important. You don't think about that when you're 30. You're like, oh yeah, whatever.
No.
But that's
Oh,
never
I
going to
know.
happen to me.
Oh, the things I would tell my 25-year-old self,
Right.
about
Right.
what's more important. But we can't go back in time,
No,
unfortunately, but we
and I
can
don't
look
want to.
forward.
Yeah, I don't want to.
Yeah, that's what I keep saying. I don't want to be 25 again. Maybe I would have my 25-year-old body, but I wouldn't want to have my 25-year-old life.
Me either. Me either. I made there are some things, of course, I think we can all say that we're not proud of, for sure. But really, Victoria, when you look at all of that, I think that's what's beautiful about being 62, is that you can look back on all of the things that have happened in your life, whether, all the great stuff and all the days where it was like, oh my gosh, will this day ever be over? My attitude is that you can look at it and you can go, okay, what did I learn from it? Yeah, it was really a terrible day. But if you can just put your head down at night and know that you did your best, and even if your best wasn't great, if you did your best, and you know that tomorrow, God willing, you wake up, you can just try to do better, be better. That's really all you can ask of yourself. And that's all we can ask of each other, is that we just do our best. That's all.
Yeah. And it builds that wisdom, and the experiences lead to wisdom about, your life and how you want to live it the next day forward.
Right. And I think that's kind of why I have the attitude that I have. I mean, I'm not great every day. Trust me. Some days are better than others, for sure. But I think it's just trying to maintain an attitude. Like yesterday, I was mean to my husband. I felt bad. I was mean to him. We were doing yard work, and doggone it, that dang trimmer, it seems like every time he uses it, the string comes out. And he said, he looked at me, I said, what is it that you're doing to that trimmer? And I could tell later in the day that I hurt his feelings. And I think we have to remember that men, their feelings get hurt too. And I felt so bad. I felt so bad. So, you just kind of turn it around, you apologize for it. So some days I'm not great. Some days I'm not always at my best. But again, I apologize for it. And, we just try to move on.
Yeah.
It wasn't nice.
So one of the things I wanted to ask you, what's your perspective and how do you feel about society's idea of beauty and aging? I really want to get to know what your feelings are about this.
Well, it probably wasn't until about 10 years ago, I really started to notice how the world treated me as a senior or as an older adult. I mean, you don't really think about it. I'm thinking, like, as I look back, you don't really consider it in your 30s, your 40s, maybe even your 50s. But there was a time, and I think it was when I was driving, that I really noticed how the world was looking at me and talking to me. Like, even at, if you're just the grocery or you're interfacing with people, especially younger people. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing. It's just the way it is. You are viewed differently. I have felt discriminated against, and I haven't taken it personally. Well, maybe I have, but you realize, yeah, the world is looking at me differently now. The world doesn't take me as seriously, or they kind of do write you off. And I kind of felt it a little. I don't know that I really felt it at Mrs. Michigan, because most of the women, they were all fabulous. They were all terrific. I never felt mistreated. It was a wonderful experience. But I remember the director saying at our workshop that we had that she was seeing, and she's been a director now for almost 20 years. So she has a lot of experience with the program. She said, we are seeing more mature, she may even use the word older, women being crowned. But I think she was actually referring to women like in their 40s rather than like their 20s or, their early 30s. She said, I would just love to see it someday that we would, crown somebody that's in their 50s and 60s. And she kind of looked at me. And, I started to think about that. I'm like, well, that's all well and good to want that. But if you look at the numbers I mean, if you look at the statistics, if you've only got 2 women that are in their 60s that are competing at a national level and everybody else is, I don't think it's going to happen. I just don't. And and quite honestly, Victoria, I think how I look is the perfect representation of a Mrs. America. I mean, I am the demographic that is making decisions. I am the demographic that is spending the money. I am the demographic that you're seeing on social media with all of the older celebrities. They're the ones that are getting the attention. I think I would have gotten a lot of press just because I am older and that I do have an opinion. And I think I'm just a wonderful representation of what Mrs. America can look like.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's definitely, they're missing the mark when they're thinking about what this can do on a bigger scale. I think that they miss the mark because they're still looking at youth as beauty.
Right. And it's not that I don't judge anybody for what they do, but I did not care for my skin when I was in my 20s and 30s. I was, out in the sun, the more tan, the better. I have not done anything except for topical. Like I do a retinol now mixed with a nice lotion, but I've not had any kind of injection. I've thought about it, but I haven't done it. I'm pretty much it. This is it. And I think a lot of women are like me. In my generation. I don't know if it's that we're afraid of it. I don't know if it's that we just never really thought about it. I don't know if we want to pay for it. I'm not sure what it is, but there are lots of women out there that look like this, that have all of this wrinkly stuff. And I think it's beautiful.
Oh, absolutely.
I think it's beautiful because we are embracing who we are. We're embracing what has happened to our bodies, and we're not, we're not afraid of it. We're embracing it. But I wish more women could do that and feel comfortable with it because it's really okay.
It is.
And I don't even use a filter. Maybe I should. I don't.
Oh,
maybe
no.
I should.
No, Chris, don't go for those filters.
Maybe I
Don't
should.
do it.
I do, no. But to answer your question, I do feel there have been times where I do feel discriminated against. And that's really that feels like a really hard word, but I have, yes. I'm not going to let it stop me, but I have.
I felt that a couple times, especially in a large box store when I'm checking out and there's a very young checker, and then there's somebody young behind me. I kind of just become invisible. And they're having this whole conversation with each other while my stuff's getting rung up at the register and bagged. Right. And then I just kind of get sent on my way so they can continue their conversation.
Right.
And it's unfortunate. It's also, like you said, we're the demographic that has the money. We're the ones who have the buying power. But for some reason, we don't have the voice, the large voice. And it's very frustrating. And I don't know what we can do to change it.
I feel like even sometimes I have to be more on top of it than other people, especially when it comes to technology. Because I feel like even if I falter a minute with my phone or fuss, I can feel it's like, oh my gosh, she has no clue what she's doing. Here, let me take it. Let me just show you what to do. Or, if I can't open a file or, because I'm out there in the world doing things too. But if I don't catch on, I almost feel like I have to be ahead of it in order to be credible, in order to with other people that I'm dealing with, whether, they're younger people, like maybe on a Zoom call or something. If I falter at all, I feel as though I'm being judged because I'm old and that I don't know how to do technology.
Oh, I do. But there you are. You have a YouTube channel. You're on Instagram. I love seeing the things that you're doing because it gives women, my age, the idea that it doesn't end. It's not over, 50 isn't the end of your life. You're going on and doing so many things. And so I love seeing everything that you're doing.
Oh, well, I try. And you know what? I think we all talk about it. I know we've talked about it in our workshops that we've done together. Everyone talks about fear, and it's true. You're afraid that it's not going to be perfect. You're afraid that it's not going to be, you're afraid of failure. You're afraid of all of the things. We know that, but there's only one way to get past it, and you just have to try. And the Mrs. Michigan pageant, actually, I kept talking about a YouTube, and it's still not great, but I did it. It's live and it's not great. And I know that, and I've accepted that, but I still did it. And I think that's just, and that just feels really good to know that at least I did it after waiting and waiting to be perfect and perfect. And finally, I'm like, it's never going to be perfect. Just do it. And I'm sure you've done the same thing, like journeying into your podcast, journeying into the business that you have. You just have to jump in and do it and be afraid and just know that it's not going to be great. It's not.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think, the imposter syndrome hits everyone. It hits men and it hits women. But sometimes I feel like for women, we have so much more to prove.
We do.
And we have to make it perfect before we try. And, I read a study that they did about girls in school and how they will not raise their hand unless they are sure they have the right answer. Whereas the boys will just throw it out there. And if they're wrong, they don't feel that failure or that they're not good enough or that they need to do work harder. Right. And so, I think having these conversations and talking to women who are breaking the mold of the expectation of their generation or their age is really important, because it gives, my daughter, I have two daughters that are 13 and 15, and I don't want them to be raised with the ideas that my generation did, which is, you can have it all, you can be it all, you can be president, you can be a mom, you can, do all these things, but they never told you how to do it. And they never told you it's okay to ask for help. And they, and that sometimes things will falter. You can't be great at everything, but you should just keep trying. And I hope that these conversations will show the generations behind us of women that you can keep going and keep trying. And it may not be perfect in the beginning, but it will get better. But it only gets better when you fail forward. So
exactly. You just reminded me about something in terms of kind of a community of women that I belong to is a community of women that never had children, and talking about what your life should look like and how other people think your life should look. And I didn't get married till I was 38. My husband was 42, and it was the first marriage for both of us. And we dated for 10 years. But when we finally got married, we didn't have children. We decided together that children were not going to be a part of our world. Just because he was 42, I'm 38. We really weren't quite sure that when we were in our 60s, where we wanted to be with children. And so we didn't. And I remember on many occasions kind of getting the stink eye, like, oh, so you don't have any kids, or, you don't have any children? And no. And and even now, it's still a little uncomfortable to say, because there's that expectation that you're going to get married and you're going to have kids. Mm-hmm. And when you don't, for whatever reason, and then, in some cases it's you just simply can't. But it was a choice. There is a social kind of stigma about that. I remember I was in a meeting once, and it was such a flattering compliment. There was a young woman sitting across the table from me, and she had just gotten married. And somebody said, well, so when are you going to start your family? And she said, well, I'm not really sure that we're going to have children. And then she looked there was like a little bit of a pause, like oh, kind of like that, oh, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And she looked right at me and she said, well, I look at Chris. She's never had children, and she has a wonderful, productive, happy life. I don't know that we really have to have a family in order to feel fulfilled. So that was such a compliment that to me, that she felt that way, and that I gave her that sense of it's okay that you don't fit the mold. It's okay. And you will have a worthwhile life that you don't need to worry about somebody else validating. They shouldn't, you don't have to worry about someone else defining what it should look like. You get to make that decision, but then you have to just be confident in the decision and not let others derail you from it.
Yeah, well, and you're a perfect example for women who are choosing not to have a family. And I think there is that, I even remember I have a friend who has chosen not to have chosen not to have children, and her husband have a very full life and they're very busy. And, but there's this idea of, well, what happens when you get older and you don't have, like, what about the holidays? You don't have children and all the memories that you can make, but you make memories of your own. And you're a prime example of being busy and fulfilled and active, and
Mhm.
you have a loving relationship with a spouse. It's not, there's no end to it because you didn't have a family. And I think that's a great example for women that if it's not something that you choose to do, it is okay.
You just said something that I actually happened. So I remember talking to I kept feeling this pressure from people like, when are you going to have children? I mean, stop asking me. I don't, stop asking and so I remember just feeling like, gosh, we need to have kids. We need to, what's going to happen when we're older? Who am I going to take care of? I have to have a purpose. And I remember saying to my husband just that. I'm like, well, I need someone to take care of. I mean, I need to have purpose. And he looked right at me, and he doesn't say a lot, but when he does, he says really good things. He said, you know what? He said, why can't you just spend your life with me and taking care of me? And I'm like, I guess I can do that. I guess I can. And yeah, as a senior adult without children, I wonder, okay, what's my life going to look like if I am alone someday? But you kind of know that you're okay with yourself. You're okay being by yourself, and you just kind of look at it and go, well, I guess I'll plan for it, and whatever happens, happens, and I'll figure it out when I get there. And a lot of times kids don't take care of their parents anyway.
That's true. Nowadays they're moving back in, and they're expecting you to take care of them forever.
Exactly. So maybe my program isn't so bad.
Well, and having that self-awareness of your capabilities, of your experience has led to the ability to do other things, and you're taking adventures. Enough about yourself that if you find something you're passionate about, you throw yourself all into it. And if you need to pivot because it's no longer serving you, you do that. You don't get stuck in things. And I think that's something that's admirable, and that women should understand that if they're stuck in something, they don't have to stay stuck. They can pivot, and it'll be okay. And as long as you find that thing that burns inside you as a passion, you're going to be all right.
You are going to be okay. I remember when my mom found out that she was going to be getting a divorce. I remember I came home. It was a hot summer day. I came home to the house, and the house was quiet, and I went in, and I looked at her, and she was like laying on the bed face down, just sobbing and sobbing and sobbing. And I'm like, Mom, what's wrong? And she said, well, she was just told that her husband was leaving her, and here we are. What are we going to do? I guess that's probably where a lot of my strength has come from, is watching my mom, time and time again, pick it up and figure it out. And, okay, we've got $50 to spend on groceries this week. What are we going to buy? It just feels like the end of the world. But somehow, I guess I don't know how, you just figure out, you just look inside and your foundation and whatever it is that strengthens you. And you just got to keep going. You just got to keep going. And there's no magic answer other than just knowing that you can do it. And like you said, reaching out for help if you need it, and not to be afraid to do that. There's no shame in that at all. It's admirable to ask for help, and there is no shame. So, just time and time again, like, okay, now what am I going to do? Well, I guess I better figure it out because I'm still alive. So I got to figure it out. And you just do.
Yeah.
I guess.
And your mom is probably a really good example for you to show you that, even at its worst, you still have to just keep going.
You do. You just have to continue. And I know I observe other women and, their lives, and I just wonder how the heck they do it. There was even though I didn't have children, there was a short period of time where I took care of a family of 5 kids. The mom had passed away, and they were ages 6 to 16. And the dad needed help. I was working full time, but I had a job that was very flexible. So I raised my hand and I said, I want to help. And so I would go to the house in the morning and get them up and get them out the door and on the bus. And then I would go to work, and then I would be back in time to greet them. And I am here to tell you right now, I do not know how single moms or parents, even if you're a pair, I don't know how. I give them so much credit. I am like doing the bow right now. It was hard, and I only did it for like 18 months. And, it's like it never stops. I would get them out the door and then I'd mop the floor and I'd get everything picked up. But then by the time they got home, they were hungry. They needed snacks. Oh my gosh, tomorrow's cupcake day or, whatever. I just don't know how I give anybody who is in that situation, like all the accolades in the world, because it is not easy. Just dragging the 16-year-old out of bed. Come on, you got to go to school. Are you ever going to get up? Are you ever going to get up? Or watching the little 6-year-old just stand in the doorway and sob her eyes out. What am I supposed to say to her? I just can't imagine how hard it is and to do that for a lifetime. Like you. Like I can't even imagine how hard that is. My life is so easy compared. I just can't even imagine how hard.
Yeah, but see, I can't even imagine like planning events for Oscar de la Renta. That's the stories that you probably have. Oh my goodness.
I think the biggest takeaway from all of that, it was such a great experience. And it was, about 5 years of that, is recognizing that sometimes it's not always you hear these horror stories about, well, they can only have pink lemonade, or, they can only, you hear about all these stories about celebrities. Here's what I learned. Oftentimes it's not so much the celebrity as much as it is their handlers that are the ones that are the pain in the tush. And you also recognize maybe why they do what they do. For instance, with Oscar de la Renta, I hosted a charity breakfast for him. And he was a lovely man. And I so wish I'd had my picture taken with him. But at that time, I was like, oh, no, I don't want to bother him to have my picture taken. Wouldn't that be amazing now to have my picture with Oscar de la Renta? But I was like, oh, no, I would never do that. I would never ask him to do that. Anyway, I remember he was seated for the breakfast and he could only have iced water from a silver pitcher and no ice. But it had to be chilled water in a silver pitcher, no ice. And, I thought, okay, whatever. But here's why. I found out why. At one time, he was at a breakfast or whatever he was at, and he was served water in a glass with ice. And we all know what happens when you're drinking water from a glass with ice. Sometimes it sticks and sometimes it spills on the front of you. And apparently that's what happened at one point. So here he is, elegant Oscar de la Renta, just this beautiful man whom everybody expects to be perfect, right? And so now he's seated and, he drinks this water and that's what happened. So that's why. Sometimes you got to kind of know the backstory. But what a wonderful experience. It taught me so much about detail. And I think that has carried over to everything that I do, especially my VRBOs, my vacation rentals. My eyes are always the last on everything before a guest checks in. I have 2 properties now. I'm looking at a third, but the challenge with that is I always want I want my eyes to be the last eyes on the property before my guests arrive, because I'm the standard. And, I think a lot of that came from doing all of those events for celebrities, but it was so fun. What was so wonderful about it was to experience all of that fancy schmancy stuff, but come back to my house that's, definitely not fancy schmancy, and know that all of that is out there and appreciate it, but come home to my home, my sanctuary, and appreciate what I had here. And understand how I could create that with what I have. So you don't necessarily have to have, the manicure. You can have that on a different scale. So it was just kind of fun to live all of that and, stay at the fancy hotels and experience all of this stuff. But how wonderful just to be able to come back to my home and just kind of have it be my sanctuary and my version of that. That was probably one of the best takeaways from that 5 years that I spent doing all that.
Well, and I've seen, the videos from your Airbnbs, and you do pay attention to detail. I've stayed in a couple on the West Coast, and you see the pictures and you're like, okay, this is cute. And then you get there and you're like, is this really what I'm walking into?
Right.
And I've seen every single detail that you put into those homes, and they're nicer than some of the details I have in my own home.
Well, it's important. I feel like I know, and I think from staying in those fancy hotels or, just knowing how it feels when you walk into a room that feels appointed, it feels like somebody did pay attention. I mean, those are the things that matter. Now, that's not to say that you may not find a spider in the corner or, something, but I'd be right there to get him, and take him outside. But I know how I want it to smell. I know how I want it to feel. I know I want that mom who books that trip for her family to have her family just say, gosh, Mom, this was the greatest ever. You books, or have the husband say, honey, you really did well. This is the perfect place. I mean, that's what I want her to feel, that, she did it. First, she got the family there, and that everyone is happy and satisfied. And that's my job as best I can to give that experience, because that's what you want. You want them to have a positive experience, because that's what they deserve.
Yeah. Well, and the stories that you told about the lakeside home and just, unplugging, disconnecting from all the junk technology and sticking your toes in the lake and being with your family and reconnecting. There's so many women out there who would love to get their kids' faces out of their phones and just have that connection again. And your properties provide that. And they're telling a story of their own because they're so beautifully detailed. Oh, I love it.
Yeah, it's all by thank you. What a compliment. Thank you. It's all by design. When I designed my first VRBO, which is actually the house I grew up in, it's on my same street. I live on the same street where I grew up, and we own the house now. I wanted that. I was kind of like wanting others to live my childhood of, what if the smell of the lake, being outside, dangling your feet from the dock. Cause then, in the 60s, we didn't have phones. And that's why I don't have a fancy TV in the house. There's just like this simple little Roku TV. There's nothing fancy. And there's one TV. That's it. Because I really want my guests to be outside. I want them to disconnect. I really want them to be a family and kind of discover what it's like to turn off your cell phone and enjoy a sunset. Instead. And I think I've been able to do that. I know everybody's going to have their phone, and I do have Wi-Fi, of course. The whole idea is, and the homes there's no clutter. Everything is just very clean. It's just very minimally appointed. And that also is easier for me to clean. But, there's not a lot of stuff. Everything is just and that was, again, all by design, because I didn't want to be distractions. I wanted my guests to come and just not have any distractions from, busyness, and just kind of try to learn how to just be together. That was the whole idea.
And the pictures are just worth a million words, I think. And what you've put together is really impressive. I'm from Cleveland, Ohio, and I have family in the Midwest, and that would be just the perfect vacation for us. I remember we would rent houseboats on a lake in Kentucky, and it would be all 13, all the cousins, the aunts and uncles. We all had the matching family T-shirts, and those are some of my fondest memories. It was 2 country radio stations, no TV, just fishing and swimming in the lake, like shampooing your hair and going down the slide to take your shower. Those were the memories that I have. And I tell my kids that, and they look at me like, you did what? Like you showered by going down a slide? And I'm like, but it was so fun to just be able to be a kid, watch my mom interact with her siblings again. They would become kids again. And it was just, those are memories that I will have forever. Yeah. And those are the things that you're creating with your Airbnbs. And so I hope, in 20 years, those kids say, gosh, we got to go to this house on the lake and do things that people don't do anymore because they're so stuck with technology.
They are. And I thank you for that. That's such a huge compliment. That's what I want for my guests. And, that's what I try to deliver. I try.
So you've had so many adventures in your 62 years. What's on the horizon for Chris? Like what are you working on now? What are your projects?
Sure. Well, I'm going like this because just across the street, we own that house. And so we just finished up getting that all ready. I have a long-term guest staying there now. So, and then we have a third property that we need to start working on. That's just about an 8-minute drive from here. So that's the next that's the next thing. But for me, in terms of how I want to build my community and my world, I do want to work more on my YouTube channel. I feel like there's a lot of opportunity there. And, we've talked about Krista, and, just seeing you and your podcast is very inspiring as well. I'm like, gee, maybe I could do that. I might be able to try that. But I want my YouTube channel to be a community. And I want it to just be a place where I can kind of talk about what I want to talk about. I had a television show and I had a radio show. And while that was really fun, I loved it. I loved having a television show and a radio show. It was just so fun. There are restrictions because you're employed by somebody or you're sponsored by somebody. So there are certain things that you can't talk about, you can't say, or certain people you can't interview because they don't advertise or whatever. So with my YouTube channel, I own it. I can do what I want. Well, obviously within reason, but I can make it what I want it to be and the community that I want. So I keep getting asked, well, what are you going to talk about? And I think I just need to talk about everything and then find out what my subscribers are interested in hearing about and then maybe focus on that. So maybe organically the content will come together. That is my next big goal, is to get I had 36 subscribers in the first 24 hours. So
good job.
Whoa. So that just tells me, look, Chris, if you really put something into it, what could you really get out of it? And for me, what I would want to get out of it is the validation of knowing that somebody's interested in what I'm doing, which is, that's just the simple truth, but also to be a place maybe where somebody can just kind of come and have a bright spot or have, I think the word inspired is way overused. I'd like to find a new word, but, maybe find just a place where they can kind of come and see somebody doing something and maybe just be inspired to try it too. I don't know, but I feel like I don't know where that will go ultimately. Gosh, ultimately, if you're thinking big, I would really love to be a guest speaker. I would love to find a way to deliver a message to people who are interested, maybe on that kind of a scale. So the only way, of course, you can do that is you got to do the pattern. You got to do you got to find the place, do the YouTube, get on, find, all the stuff before you can move in that direction. That's what I think would be wonderful. Ultimately, Victoria, I want to be able to do whatever I do from wherever I am. So if I am renting a house in Spain for a month, or if I'm traveling in an RV, which I don't have, but I just think that would be so fun. I want to be able to do whatever I do from wherever I am. And if I can find a way to make money doing that too, that would be great. But money is not my driver. I know my husband probably wouldn't want to hear that, but money is not my driver. I mean, it's nice to have money, but it's not, at this point in my life, it's really not my driver. I think my driver is just more having community and just knowing that I've been able to make a difference for somebody.
Yeah, I think connection is one of the things that I was really looking for in creating this podcast. And, I think all the teachers of social media tell you, niche down, find your niche. But women are so complex and there's so much to us that the idea of paring down to just one idea when we're so multifaceted just didn't excite me. And I was like, no, I want to have conversations with experts on health and fitness, but I also want to have conversations like this with women who've led remarkable lives and done amazing things. And, you have wisdom to share. And I think that that's also just as important for people to experience. So I have one last question for you. I asked this of my guests. If you could give one piece of advice to upcoming midlife women, like the next generation moving up into our shoes, what's your one piece of advice for them?
Don't let others define what your life should look like.
That's perfect. That's perfect. Well, thank you so much.
You wonder what you could say to your 20-year-old self, your 12-year-old self. Don't let others define what your life should look like. I mean, there are certain things that you have to do in life, of course, but don't let others make that decision for you. And I think as mentally we let that happen and it derails us.
Yeah, that does happen. So that's a good one. Thank you so much. And thank you, Chris, for taking the time to talk with me today. It's been such a pleasure. I think we could keep going.
I know. And I feel like I've been rambling. It's just been so much fun. I can't believe you're interested in my little life over here in the Midwest.
Oh, your life is so fascinating. And the stories that come from it, it's just, like I said, I could just talk to you forever.
Yeah,
so, but for the interest of time, we probably need to wrap up. For other people, there's only so many loads of laundry that women can do while they're listening to this. But thank you so much for the opportunity to have this chat. It's been great.
What a joy. Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining me today. We'll be back next week for another episode of Women Mastering Midlife. Until then, find us on Instagram at Women Mastering Midlife and join my free Facebook community, Women Mastering Midlife, to continue our discussions. If you have any questions that you'd like answered on an Ask Me Anything episode, send your emails to hello@missvictoriabird.com.